cops were beating on the doors, and everybody's trying to get out the emergency exit. And my old man, my father, put his arm in between the place of the 4x4s, and everybody on the other side, the police were trying to beat the door down, and they called for a battering ram. When they called for a battering ram, he knew that he couldn't hold out against the battering ram. He pulled his arm out, and he was arrested. He went to jail for a year and a day.
Consequently, gambling houses, whether a sawdust joint or one of the fancier clubs, went to all sorts of creative extremes to try to avoid the inevitable bust.
The only way to get there was through an elevator. There were no stairs anywhere. It was just an elevator. And what you would have to do is, first of all, you have to get on the elevator, which was not an easy thing to do, but when you did, it would take approximately 4 to 5 minutes for that elevator to go up one flight of stairs, or one floor. And of course, by the time you did, they had put all the slot machines behind the wall, and they had flipped all the tables and made it into bridge.
They had games, card tables, with just a green felt, but up in the ceiling they had cameras with film strip on them. When they turned them on, it would portray a layout from the camera. And of course, in case of a raid, turn the cameras on. It wasn't the camera, it was a projector. Turn the projector off, and there went the layout, and there was just a plain table. Everybody sat around playing cards.
The crack games were billiard tables with the cloth stretched over it and the sides pushed down. And if the cops, they would roll that up, put it away, and people would be playing billiards. And they couldn't do anything as long as the games were apart.
A lot of the gambling equipment was designed for easy dismantling, and everyone knew the cue.
If you hear the buzzer, there's a big buzzer on the wall. They pushed the buzzer, and they wouldn't let people, the cops in because they had to go through 4 or 5 doors. And by that time, we had games where they could come apart. Everybody, all the dealers would be rushing around, putting games into a storage room.
Like the big screw on them, they could take it apart, fold it up, carry it out. All the chips would put in bushel baskets. So when they found, all they found was a rather large kitchen and the chef and a dishwasher and me.
It would take about 5-8 minutes to take them apart and run real fast and put them away.
Everybody's got a job to do. You got to take the chips and the whole thing. And you're just standing around like, you know, you're listening to the radio or whatever.
This cat and mouse game went on for more than 50 years in many parts of the country. Another common way that people found their way into the illegal casino business was by first running a small horse book.
A horse book, for those of you that are uninitiated, is a place where you can bet on horses. And of course, in the horse book itself, they always had crab games, 21 games, sometimes a roulette wheel.
Beginning in the 1890s, out of Lexington, Kentucky, a man by the name of Tennis began to send news across the Western Union telegraph lines about each of the horse races at certain major horse tracks. Bookies in various cities then would open up what were called wire rooms, and people would come and bet on the horse race that was being held maybe 1,000 miles away.
There was a fellow that was a teletype operator that would take the calls of the races on teletype, then he'd announce them over the speaker. And he'd say that, they're off in the first race in New York, and at the quarter it's 2-by-1, 3-by-2, number 4 is running third, things like that.
All over the country, the backrooms of bars, barber shops, newsstands, and cigar stores were becoming fronts for places where a man could get a drink and place a bet on a horse. With an estimated 15,000 of them operating in America in 1930, many of them eventually became legal horse books, like this one. Veteran Las Vegas casino owner Jackie Gaughan got his start in gaming by running horse books back in Omaha.
When I come back from the Army, I opened my own place. I call it the Park Avenue Cigar Store. It was on Park Avenue in Leavenworth. Cigar store front, and I had bookmaking downstairs and bookmaking upstairs. The bookmaking on horses wasn't legal, and the bookmaking on sports was. So you could bet on sports upstairs in my place, play going downstairs in my place. You could bet on horses, but it was illegal.
The men who owned the wire service were obviously powerful people, and because it was so lucrative, those who had it coveted it.
When we were still in Houston, all the service for the sports events, the horse race and everything, came into our garage. My father had the service, and several people tried to get the service. In fact, they burned our garage down.
By the 1920s, this was consolidated into what was called the Continental Wire Service. And in 1927, this was taken over by Moses Annenberg, a multimillionaire publisher, owner of the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper, a very prestigious newspaper.
Annenberg believed he was simply providing a news service with the horse race wire. Still, while the wire made him wealthy, it tainted his image to be associated with the underworld who ran the clubs that bought the wire service. His son Walter has spent his life developing a more wholesome and philanthropic family reputation, at one point donating $500 million to public education. He also served as U.S. Ambassador to Great Britain and, among other honors, received the Medal of Freedom from President Reagan. Jackie Gaughan went on to great success in Las Vegas, owning many hotel casinos, including
Union Plaza, Las Vegas Club, El Cortez, Western, Gold Spike.
And the Resnik boys also did quite well in the horsebook business in Detroit, no thanks to Emil's son, Bernie.
I'm 4 years old and they asked me to pick a horse. And I ran my finger down and I got one, I pointed to one called Pomegranate. And everybody in the joint bet on it. And it won. It cost my father $2,500. Now, in those days, $2,500 was an awful lot of money. By the time the smoke cleared and the screaming stopped, I was barred from the horse book for the rest of my childhood.
During the Roaring '20s, Hollywood's elite had been heading down to what was called the wickedest city in the world, a place just south of Tijuana, Mexico called Agua Caliente, which offered luxury, privacy, casinos, and a racetrack. When Caliente shut down in 1935, the in crowd went out to the desert, east of Los Angeles, near what is now Palm Springs. The first club that opened was called the Dunes and was owned by a man named Al Wertheimer.
You never heard of the mafia in those days. It was just hoods in Chicago and Detroit. And he was supposedly one of the hoods from a gang they called the Purple Gang.
It was a coat and tie joint that catered to such well-known names as Errol Flynn, Howard Hughes, John Ireland, and Dorothy Parker. Then Earl Saucer opened the 139 Club, named like many clubs for its lot number.
It was a very cheaply built little house, and the walls, he had plywood all around the walls, and he'd get movie stars to sign them.
And then they would burn it in with a burning pencil the next day. A poem, something cute, like Dorothy Parker. She wrote Little Dottie, the gambling kid. Wanted to win and always did. I ate your free food and drank your booze. At a game like that, how could I lose, D. Parker?
The famous duo of Clark Gable and Carole Lombard had signed the walls, as had frequent guests Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz.
In fact, Lucy had to cut him off. She limited him to $5,000 lost, and then they wouldn't let him play anymore because he was a wild man on the gambling table.
The Cove actually had valet car parkers, and like other Palm Springs clubs, locals were not allowed inside to gamble. The gambling houses in the desert were like private clubs for the rich and famous.
We might get a phone call from let's say, one of the wealthy horse owners. As you know, the boys, this might be one of the Whitneys or one of them, something like that, we have horses running at Santa Anita tomorrow. And the boys want to go and see the morning workouts. Well, we're having dinner at the club early, which would have been the Palm Springs Racket Club. And then we'd like to know if we could reserve a roulette table at 8:30 for a couple of hours. And they would not only request the table to be reserved, they would request the dealer if he's still in your employ.
Another favorite trendy hangout was, oddly enough, 3 miles off the coast of L.A. on several huge gambling ships.
Tony Conero, one of many names, operated some large World War I vessels he purchased and converted into floating casinos.
Cornero was said to be the